there's a lot of chatter about how the gaming industry has fallen short of what people want it to be. And I will be the first to say that sometimes that's true. Sometimes live service games fall short because developers focus more on creating a never-ending stream of content and less on producing quality content. Certainly there was a time when you would go down to the software store and you'd buy a game, and that game would have to be complete because there was no internet. And if there was, there probably was no live patching happening. So the expectation was the game had to be complete when you took it out of the box and installed it. So I think that the testing of games was better in some cases, just because there was no opportunity to have periodic patches and live updates all the time. I also think that there's the issue of bloat, where sometimes games are extremely large, expansive, and it winds up being a situation where it's an ocean across but a puddle deep. So maybe instead of creating something which is intensely amazing in a concentrated way, we try to create something which feels bigger, but it's not necessarily better. It's kind of like if you were to look at the game Daggerfall, the old Elder Scrolls game. It had, I believe, one of the biggest game worlds, or possibly the biggest game world in history. And yet it wasn't really that notable necessarily, in the sense that it was all just the same thing over and over again. It's not like you would see an enormous amount of variation if you decided to walk all the way across the map from, one end to the other. So it's not necessarily about how much content is released. It's also about the quality of the content that's released. And sometimes in the case of live service games, just like live service everything, you can have a situation where the quality is diminished because we're trying to continue to make content forever to keep people hooked on one franchise, essentially without any sunsetting on the horizon. And people do get tired of things. So, is it really fresh and new if you've been continuing to keep it going for, a decade? So there are things which are imperfect about the gaming industry, but I also think it's important to make a point to recognize that it's also probably the most amazing time ever for gaming as a whole. Right now, I think on my radar, there's a new game called Inzoi coming out, and it's a bit like a much more immersive, graphically advanced version of something like The Sims. But it sounds like it's going to be a game, if it turns out to be what it looks like, it'll be a game that puts the Sims to shame, fusing a lot of RPG elements with life sim elements, and it could be a really, really fascinating game to be able to play and experience. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to a game called Kaiserpunk, which is a city building game set in the World War I era, I believe, a bit in the brain of Anno 1800, a game kind of like that, mixing Anno type mechanics in city building with some elements more from grand strategy games like Hearts of Iron or Europa Universalis. And that's pretty interesting. We have, I believe, Elder Scrolls 6 on the horizon, and I know it has been on the horizon for nearly a decade now, probably, or maybe more than a decade, I don't know. Yeah, Elder Scrolls 6 has been on the horizon for so long, we don't even necessarily have words for that because it sounds like I think the trailer for Elder Scrolls 6 is now older than Elder Scrolls 5 was at the time when the trailer was released, which is kind of crazy. That being said, though, now it appears to really be actually on the horizon in earnest. We really are going to probably have an Elder Scrolls 6 next year, which is pretty cool. If you look at the Elder Scrolls Online map, we've just about got it filled in, really. I hope that we get to see a few new zones coming along, like maybe a central Skyrim would be amazing to make it so that you can actually circumnavigate the map of Tamriel and go all the way around it through connected zones. That would be amazing. In any case, I'm really just trying to make a point here that there is cynicism in the space about what gaming should be. Sometimes people get frustrated. But the reality is we are in a golden age for gaming. There's so many amazing games out there. You'd be hard pressed to say that this is not the best time to be a gamer. The other thing that's really amazing is that we have so many franchises which have had time to mature. For example, Witcher 3, Elder Scrolls 5, Skyrim, many others. Tomb Raider series. There's a lot of games out there which are good games. And if you get into them now, you're getting into them in a state of completion. You're able to get a good deal on Steam and get the entire complete collection, all DLCs at affordable rates. And that's pretty cool to be able to get into gaming at a time when you don't have to be drip fed DLCs for a lot of these titles. You can just jump in and enjoy a decade worth of content all at once. And that's pretty impressive. And I say that coming from the perspective of someone who played games in the early 2000s, and then I didn't play them as an adult for more than a decade. I really just took a break from gaming, and then I got back into it. And now I'm, I would say gaming is my main hobby. And it's just so cool to feel like I can jump into established franchises that have already had the opportunity to work out a lot of the kinks and bugs. And, if anything, now I feel like there's so much content that exists in the gaming space. I don't even know where to begin. Like there's enough content in major games that I want to play that I could put what feels like a lifetime into it and still not have finished all of the stuff that there is out there to experience. So definitely really cool to see all the things that are happening. And I also think it's important to touch on how we get cynical, because sometimes when we were younger, we looked at things through more rose shaded glasses. We looked at things more through the lens of imagination and less from a more technical perspective. So it was easy at that time to really just immerse in something and be extremely excited about something that was actually pretty simple. Now we have a lot of amazing graphics. We have a lot of incredible things that we can participate in, but we also probably have lost a little bit of the imagination that comes along with maybe childhood. And so we're looking for this nostalgia kick. And really, it's not that the games aren't good. It's just that maybe our perception of them is different than it used to be. So it's a great time to play games. I do think something that I would touch on is that games used to be simple. simple in the sense that you would install them and you would probably start playing them immediately. Over the course of an afternoon, you would essentially master a game. And you would proceed then to just, play it casually. It wasn't like you expected that one game to become some sort of a career necessarily. And now I think games have gotten so large that there's this implied time commitment that you've got to sink your life into it. And that's really cool because it's kind of, it's just exciting to say, I'm going to immerse myself in this extensive, expansive world that is basically endless. Except it can be overwhelming because the games are so large. It's not like you can just play them real quick, get to the end, say you did it, and it is what it is. Like if you were playing Tetris, for example, that's not a game where you need to put a lot of time commitment into it. It's just a little entertainment as a distraction. So we went from having little games that were easy to get your head around and fun, plug and play experiences, to games that are so big, so expansive that they wind up kind of being a career in and of themselves. And I think that has led us to a situation where burnout is a little bit more common than it probably used to be, just because the relationship that we have to games sort of evolved from something more comparable to arcades of the past to a completely fleshed out hobby in and of itself. And that's not a bad thing. It's just to say games are dramatically different today than what they used to be in the late 90s and early 2000s. And that's something that, it's a double-edged sword. It comes with positives and it comes with negatives. And I would say overall it's more positive than negative because, and I guess I probably would close with this, I like to think about games like, for example, SimCity 2000. Then I compare a game like SimCity 2000 to a game like Cities Skylines 2. Now, I could throw stones at Cities Skylines and say, well, that game isn't perfect for any number of different reasons. But why is it that I'm playing that game and I'm not still playing SimCity 2000? Well, the reason is because it's far better in every way than SimCity 2000 was. So then why is it that there's this sense of feeling like somehow some of those old simple games were better than the new ones? Maybe part of it is what I was talking about, where the games are bigger, so they're harder to understand. It's harder to get your head around them, things like that, right? But more likely it's just that we look back with rose-shaded glasses when we contemplate the past, and we overplay how amazing those things were, just because at that time we were probably children. We had a limited amount of things that we had access to. And the few things that did exist were a lot more amazing because they were a lot more unusual. Kind of like how the first time you drove a car, you were super excited about it. And now driving a car is probably not a particularly exciting thing for you because it's not a particularly new thing for you. There was a time when gaming was an amazing, fantastic new thing. And now it's not a new thing anymore, but that does not mean that it isn't fantastic. So maybe if we want to rekindle the love of gaming, one of the things we can do is to focus on eliminating distractions, because I really, really feel like a big factor that is controllable and real is the fact that we always are distracted now. We don't want to read books. We don't want to just sit down and do something completely in a mindful and present way. We're always looking for a way to do more than one thing at once. We're always looking for a way to multitask and turn the games we play into some sort of a, second screen activity. And as a result, it winds up being less fun because it's not immersive. And, when I think about gaming as a child, I didn't sit down at the computer with a bunch of stuff being watched on YouTube on the second screen while I look at my phone in my other hand. It wasn't like that. I would sit down. I wasn't even listening to music or anything. I was just sitting there 100% committed to playing that game. And I really think that's one of the big things that has messed us up, where we feel less engaged. That and the issue of too much variety. Too much variety in the sense that instead of mastering 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 titles, we want to load up the Steam library with everything that was on sale. And then we have so many options, we're just overloaded. Instead of being excited about a few things that we have on the docket that we want to play and having really good experiences with those things, we're spread too thin. So I think having fewer things that you're doing and spending more time being mindful on those things and eliminating some of the distractions like social media and secondary content, that's a really important thing to rekindle the love of gaming. And then some of it is just to understand that, nostalgia is a thing, and we look back on stuff with fond memories just because it's not that the games aren't great, it's that our place in life today is different than what it used to be, which isn't a bad thing, it's just the truth. And then, of course, there are some things which are real challenges in the industry where we can legitimately criticize opportunities that maybe game devs have to focus on producing quality content instead of trying to over monetize content or just produce it for the sake of ensuring that people still have a live service game to sink money and time into. But if there is a high level takeaway, I think it's this: that we live in an amazing time for gaming, an amazing time for computing, and we should remember that and not be too cynical, as all things in life can lead us down a path of cynicism. Sometimes it's also important to take a few steps back and say, my goodness, like how far we have come. It really is a pretty amazing time to be alive. As always, whatever your game might be, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.